I know there's some out there that find Albedo annoying, but I don't think anyone can really deny the fact that there was just a lot of wholesome stuff with this episode with her. Like, Albedo obviously has always been very thirsty or lusty towards Ainz. We've seen this basically since the first episode of Overlord many, many years ago. But when you see this episode, she obviously is like, hey, Ainz, could you, give me a kiss and all that? I could ward off illness, disease, whatever. And obviously this is typical Albedo and how she normally is. But seeing Ainz kind of return some of her romantic feelings by, giving her a kiss on the cheek, even if it wasn't on the lips, and then turning around and hugging her, it's a very emotional moment, because it's like, you don't expect Ainz to be just that open about that, and obviously he got embarrassed and even told the maid, hey, don't tell anyone or mention what you just saw, forget about it. But it's a really big moment, because it shows that Ainz is trying in his own way to accept Albedo's feelings, and obviously Albedo is really happy about that, and I love that moment. It's a very wholesome moment. It's easily one of my favorite moments of Overlord Season 4 so far, just because it's a very nice way to show that there is some development going on between Ainz and Albedo, even if it is mostly slow. Just appreciate that. It's a really great scene, and I love how the animators really went all in for that scene, and I just think that they really put a lot of passion into it. I mean, the voice actors did definitely, because it was just well voice acted. But let's talk about a few elephants in the room. So one of the big things I think many are going to start to notice, especially with Season 4 of Overlord, is just how heavy it is in the politics. Here's the thing. I think anyone that has been watching Overlord obviously knows that's kind of goes hand in hand. Politics, like the political environment of, let's say, inside the world of Overlord, goes hand in hand with the story and the characters, etc. Because obviously, even if Ainz doesn't fully want world domination, he's going to get involved with the world because he's just so powerful. He has strong, allies, etc. It's bound to happen eventually. Obviously, thanks to Ainz and all of Nazarick kind of coming out into the sunlight now, no longer having to hide in the shadows and, basically have their own kingdom, this means that they have to be more public figures. They have to worry about their reputation. Ainz has to worry about his reputation. And because of that, obviously, he's going to get involved in a lot of other countries' overall political environment. And so, with this episode and the previous episodes, there is definitely a lot of that. And I feel like many that probably have forgotten about Overlord, because it has been years. Like, it legitimately has been years since Season 3 came out. And obviously, there's probably newcomers that, have just recently maybe have caught up with Overlord. They might be just taken aback by the sheer volume of maybe the politics or the political drama within Overlord. And I'm just going to tell you, it's a big part of the story. I'm just going to be honest with you. It really is, because it's like the world building with the politics are a big part for, all the other characters to slowly establish power within the world and get a lot stronger, gain allies, etc. And I'm just going to be honest, it's here to stay. That type of theme, that element of the story will definitely be here basically to the far future of later volumes. But anyways, let's actually talk about what this episode did in terms of story and what it's setting up. So, one of the big details of this episode is obviously shifting our POV to the king of the Empire and getting to see his overall reaction to what happened at the end of Season 3. Now, to make sure everybody's on the same page, to remind everybody, because once again it has been years, so I'm going to make sure I remind everybody, the king of the Empire that we follow throughout this episode, he was someone that was a part of the battlefield against the kingdom, and he was technically on the side of Ainz. He was just sitting there with his army, just watching, and he got to witness basically what Ainz was capable of. He was the one that asked Ainz to use a spell to kind of initiate the battle, to show off his strength, to be a spectacle, and people would be just in awe of the sheer might of what the Sorcerers Kingdom would actually be. And obviously, when you look at the way the king was, trying to talk about, at least in Season 3, he had no idea in his mind when he made that statement that Ainz would be capable of just a snap of his fingers, he would wipe out pretty much an entire army, over 100,000 people with a single spell by himself without even using his army. Nobody probably could have expected that. Let's be honest. Like, even if we as the audience did, nobody within the world of Overlord was definitely prepared for what they witnessed on that day. And so obviously, just as much as the people that got trampled and died to the little goats that Ainz summoned, to also just seeing maybe some of the survivors on the other side, you have the people that were obviously on Ainz's side that were humans that got to witness that, and they were probably just as scared, or maybe even more so, because in a flick of a second, just in one moment, maybe Ainz could turn on them and just wipe them all out. He basically proved that no matter how strong you are, no matter how much effort you have in the sword, the shield, whatever, the warrior way, he can wipe you out by being like far distance, like miles away from you, and a snap of his fingers, you're gone. And that's scary. It's really, really frightening. And so the king obviously has to weigh that burden on his shoulders because he realizes he's responsible for all that death, but he also realizes that, it makes sense why a lot of knights would want to, resign, which is one of the big plot points that start off in this episode, is that he has to go through a bunch of papers on his table, and he realizes that, a bunch of knights are just saying, we quit, which, once again, we gotta think about this from a logical POV. If you were in the knight shoes or the king's shoes, etc., and you got to witness a monstrosity like Ainz, okay? If you got to witness someone just wipe everybody out like that, it's just like, I don't get paid enough for this. You'd be thinking like, if the man can do something like this, we're gonna die regardless. So I'm just gonna take my chances and enjoy life instead of being on the battlefield to just die like that. I'd rather just be with my family. That's probably what all these knights pretty much are thinking, and it just shows you the level of burden and stress that Ainz and his entire kingdom can put on others without even actually directly attacking them. And you get to see that overall weight of Ainz, the military power of Ainz weighing in on the king even throughout this episode, especially just with his very appearance at the end to participate in that gladiator tournament fight. That just says enough. I mean, the king was literally scared. He was crapping himself, and he's losing hair as well, which makes sense with the stress and all that. Anyone would be stressed out, pulling their hair, losing hair, if they got to see everything they already got to see in the past few weeks or months or whatever. So, like I said, it all makes sense. But we can obviously talk a little bit deeper about this. So one of the things that I think many are going to love about this episode is we got that, one major iconic moment. An iconic moment that we see time and time again. It's like an ongoing gag with Sasuga Ainz-sama. Basically, no matter what Ainz does, even if, he doesn't intentionally mean it, everything works out according to plan, and he is amazing. Basically, his appearance being in that gladiator arena and being there in the first place, even if he didn't intentionally want to spy in on what the king was saying, creating peace negotiations, or negotiating against the Sorcerers Kingdom, because we know for a fact Ainz probably had no idea what was going on. He just went there just to probably have a bit of fun and talk with the king. And so when you think about just everything, we had one of those moments. But it shows though that Ainz' very presence being there is so worrying that everybody just dropped what they were doing. The people that were going to be negotiating with the king was like, nah, we're out of here. If you want to sell us out, fine, but we're not working with you. And they just straight up left. And Ainz completely demolished any chances or hope for the Empire potentially having other allies to step up against Ainz, which, let's be honest, most of them, they really can't do anything to begin with. We've already seen the military might of Ainz, and I'll talk about more of that in a second. But the point is that the king, the very burden and the weight of Ainz and the Sorcerer's Kingdom is crushing him slowly without Ainz even doing anything. It's only going to be a matter of time until basically the Empire becomes a vassal of the Sorcerer's Kingdom. It's only a matter of time at this point just because of everything that has been happening. Now let's talk about the military might. So, in terms of military might of Ainz, we know how strong Ainz is. We don't need to go over that. We know they're broken, okay. But we need to talk about the individuals, like Death Knights, Death Cavalry, stuff like that. Now, a long time ago, it was established that a single Death Knight pretty much can wipe out an army, or a mini army pretty much by itself. It's just incredibly powerful. Most people just cannot deal with a Death Knight. But we know from Ainz's perspective, and the NPCs a part of Nazarick, a Death Knight is a trash mob to Ainz. It's just straight up a trash mob. He doesn't name them, he just throws them out, he can just create them like nothing, and he definitely has higher tier summons that he could do like nothing. So because of that, you just see him have Death Cavalry and Death Knights all over the place, and people are just automatically freaking out because of this. But it's even scarier that Ainz has all of this, and he doesn't even give them a name. He doesn't even respect them enough to give them a name, because that's just how throwaway they really are. They're trash mobs. So that's just interesting. It's really interesting just to see that, and nobody really can stand up to him no matter what they do. Now, there is some hints that maybe Godkin might be able to stand up to Ainz to some degree, but anything else that he really has to throw at them that's above Death Knights, the Godkin are not really going to be able to do much. So there is hints that maybe there will be something within this world to slightly stand up to Nazaric's forces, but not enough to really bring them down. And I think that's one of the other big draws to why people love Overlord, such as myself, is because it literally is a Demon King / Demon Lord gaining power, conquering the world, and there's just nothing you can really do about it. Obviously, Ainz isn't evil. He can be. He definitely can be. We have seen it. But the point is that Ainz is someone that technically just wants to spread his name, live like a family with the NPCs, and that's about it. That's really it. I mean, there's a little bit more to it, but obviously that's kind of really making it bare bones and just simplistic as possible. That's all he really wants. So it's like, the fact that someone like that is conquering the world is just so hilarious, but also scary to see. Just, once again, just shows you how strong he is. So yeah, overall, this episode of Overlord is fantastic. I mean, we have the setup at the end with the Warrior King and how Ainz is supposed to fight it. Let's be honest, that Warrior King's not giving out too much. No, there's just no way. I mean, even the king himself knows. He's like, give it your best. He's aware that Ainz is about to wipe that man off the face of the earth. But, yeah, it's a great episode of Overlord. I love this week's episode, and I think many can agree with me that this is a good season of Overlord, and it has been fun. It's been super, super fun. Tell me your thoughts, honestly, how you felt about Overlord. Did you enjoy this week's episode? Did you hate this episode? How do you feel about Albedo? How do you feel about the political environment of this story? Just be honest in the comments below. I am incredibly curious, but if you enjoyed the video, leave me a like. Helps me out a lot. With that, be safe, stay healthy. Chibi out.